welcome back to another quiet night, another slow drift through history. You're listening to Boring History for Sleep, the place where the world's most forgotten tales come alive, just softly enough to make your eyelids heavy. Tonight, we're traveling back to the dark stone corridors of medieval castles, to the freezing nights when guards had to keep watch while everyone else was deep asleep beneath layers of wool and dreams. But those poor souls on the walls, they had no warm bed, no fire to hug them. So, how did they survive those icy winds? How did they stay awake or even sleep without freezing to death? It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? But the medieval world was full of little secrets, tricks born from necessity, survival, and sheer stubbornness. We'll uncover all of it tonight, slowly, quietly, step by step, from the layers they wore to the fires they built in hidden corners, from the warm ale they drank to the strange shifts they shared with their comrades under the moonlight. And as we wander through those cold corridors together, you might just find yourself drifting off, imagining the sound of armor clinking softly, a torch flickering near a stone wall, and the calm voice of history whispering through time. Before we begin, if you're new here, welcome to our little sleepy corner of the internet. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next quiet journey into the past. Each night we wander into another forgotten story, some strange, some beautiful, some a little bit sad, but all told just slow enough for your mind to rest. Now, pull your blanket a little closer. Let your breathing slow down, and let's travel together back to the time of kings and knights, where even the strongest men had to find warmth in a world made of stone and frost. Our story begins inside the castle walls, where a single guard stands by a wooden door, his breath visible in the cold air, and the night, oh, the night feels endless. Whispers. Let's begin.
The night inside a medieval castle was nothing like the nights we know today. It wasn't peaceful, it wasn't warm, it wasn't even quiet. Every gust of wind that crept through the cracks in the stone walls carried a sound, sometimes the moan of the cold, sometimes a whisper of something else. In those lonely corridors, guards began their nightly duty. Their armor, cold as ice, clinked faintly as they walked. The weight of steel pressed against their shoulders, and the chill of winter bit through every layer they wore. Imagine this. You're a guard in the 1300s. There's no heater, no electric light, no thick blanket waiting for you. Just a torch in your hand, a sword on your belt, and the endless black of the night stretching across the courtyard. Some guards wrapped themselves in what was called a gambeson, a padded coat made from layers of linen or wool. It wasn't fancy, but it trapped warmth between its stitches. Others tied rough woolen scarves around their necks, or even stuffed straw into the soles of their boots. Primitive, maybe, but it worked. The castles were made of stone, thick, strong, and utterly freezing. At night, the walls radiated cold. The air smelled of damp moss and iron. Sometimes even the torches struggled to stay lit, flickering weakly in the wind. It's strange, isn't it? How silence can feel louder than sound. The guards often said the quiet nights were worse than the noisy ones, because when the world goes silent, your own thoughts begin to echo. You start to think about home, about the fire burning in your family's hearth, about your wife or child asleep under warm blankets. Some guards talked to themselves to stay awake. Others hummed old songs, small, clumsy tunes to keep their spirits alive. A few whispered prayers again and again, as if the rhythm of faith could hold back the cold. And sometimes when two guards met in passing, they'd share a small grin or half a joke. "Still alive?" one guard would ask through chattering teeth. "Barely," the other would answer with a tired smile. Those tiny moments of humor, they were warmth in their own way. Beyond the castle walls, the world slept under snow. But inside, the life of the night guard continued, slow, quiet, endless. They had rotations, of course. No one could stay out too long. 2 hours on duty, maybe 3 at most, then a chance to rest, if rest was even the right word. Sleeping inside a castle wasn't cozy either. The guard rooms were small stone chambers with no insulation, no glass windows, just a wooden shutter rattling against the wind. A small fire might burn in the corner if they had wood that night. They would lie down on straw beds, thin layers of hay stuffed inside rough sacks. Sometimes the straw was damp, sometimes full of mice. But when your bones ached and your body shook from cold, even that rough bed felt like a small miracle. A few guards slept fully dressed, armor and all, just to keep the warmth trapped. The trick was simple: don't let the heat escape. Once you start shivering, it's already too late. So they'd curl up, knees to chest, arms wrapped tightly around themselves, boots still on, sword nearby, just in case. Because you never knew when trouble might come knocking. At times, the castle dogs were their best company. Big, shaggy hounds that wandered freely through the courtyards. Guards would whistle softly to them, share scraps of bread or bits of meat. And sometimes those dogs would settle beside them, sharing their warmth through fur and friendship. And when the night began to fade, when the sky turned pale with the first hint of dawn, the guards who survived the long hours felt that tiny relief, that faint whisper of sunlight promising another day. They would change shifts. The new guards, sleepy and slow, stepped into the same cold.
and the ones finishing their watch walked down the narrow stairs until they reached their corner of straw and fire. Before sleeping, some would stare at the flames for a few seconds longer, as if afraid that when they closed their eyes, the warmth would vanish too. But sleep always came, not soft, not peaceful, but enough to keep them alive. And so the cycle went on, night after night. Men against the cold, armor against the frost, and the quiet heartbeat of a castle that never truly slept. Funny, isn't it? Centuries later, we build castles again, but now with central heating and soft pillows. And still, we complain when it's a little chilly. In those days, warmth wasn't comfort, it was survival. And the guards, they were its silent soldiers.
The hidden tricks of survival. During the long, frozen nights of the Middle Ages, survival inside a castle wasn't about bravery alone. It was about finding clever ways to fight the cold. Guards quickly learned that standing still was dangerous. If they stopped moving, the chill crept up their legs and stiffened their fingers until even gripping a sword became painful. So they kept walking. Slow, steady circles along the battlements, boots tapping softly on stone. Sometimes they stamped their feet or swung their arms just to keep the blood moving. It might have looked funny, but it worked. Inside, the luckier guards gathered near small fires or torches that burned weakly against the wind. They warmed their hands, roasted bits of bread, and told stories about home. For a few minutes, the laughter and crackle of fire made them forget the frost outside. Some castles had little rooms called night chambers near the gates. Two men could rest there between shifts, borrowing a bit of heat drifting from nearby kitchens. Even a few degrees of warmth could mean the difference between sleep and shivering till dawn. Layering was another secret. They wore linen shirts, wool tunics, and heavy cloaks, trapping air between each layer. Wool was the best of all. It stayed warm even when wet. Some even stuffed straw inside their clothes or boots to block the wind. Crude, yes, but surprisingly effective. When the cold grew too sharp, they lit small braziers, metal bowls filled with coal or wood. These could be carried from one post to another, giving both light and heat. But a single spark could turn danger into disaster, so every guard kept a close eye on the flame. There were smaller tricks too. Guards heated stones near the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and tucked them under their cloaks before heading out. A medieval version of the hot water bottle. And sometimes, when words froze in the air, two guards would simply stand closer, shoulders touching, sharing warmth in silence. Each little act, every step, every layer, every ember, was a way to stay alive until the first light of morning. In those castles of stone and wind, survival was not one great victory, it was 1,000 small ones, repeated every night.
Medieval castles were marvels of stone. Massive walls, towering battlements, and corridors that seemed endless. By day, they impressed with their strength and grandeur. But night, however, those same walls became relentless carriers of cold. The stone, thick and solid, absorbed the winter chill and held it, making the nights inside as unforgiving as the winters outside. Yet, those who lived within these walls did not surrender to the frost. They learned to turn stone into warmth, to manipulate their environment in ways that were subtle, clever, and entirely necessary for survival. The first secret was fireplaces. Unlike modern ones designed for comfort, medieval hearths were functional masterpieces. Deep, wide stone boxes held large logs, and their chimneys were angled to maximize airflow while keeping the heat inside. The fire's warmth would radiate into the surrounding stone, slowly releasing stored heat throughout the night. Guards quickly discovered that pressing a back against a sun-warmed or fire-warmed wall could be far warmer than any blanket. But fireplaces weren't enough. Guards also used heated stones, large slabs warmed in the fire, wrapped in cloth, and tucked near their beds or inside cloaks. The heat from these stones lasted hours, providing a small pocket of comfort in an otherwise frozen room. Some even placed them inside boots or under straw bedding. It sounds primitive today, but for them it was ingenious. Castle builders themselves added more tricks. In some great halls, heat channels were carved behind walls, guiding warm air from kitchens and bakeries into living quarters. The effect was subtle, a gentle, invisible warmth that crept into the stone floors and walls. To the untrained eye, the walls were cold. To the guards, however, they had become quiet allies, radiating life in the dead of night. The placement of guard rooms was equally deliberate. Small chambers were often positioned near hearths or thick walls that absorbed residual heat. Even a difference of a few feet could mean the difference between shivering awake and a slightly warmer, more bearable night. Guards arranged their beds, usually straw-filled sacks, against these walls, maximizing the faint heat radiating from stone and fire. Clothing, too, was part of this battle. Layering was essential. Linen shirts close to the skin, padded gambesons, woolen cloaks, scarves, and sometimes fur-lined boots or gloves. The goal wasn't fashion, it was survival. Breath trapped between layers, and careful positioning of heated stones could make the difference between enduring the night or succumbing to cold. Even on the coldest nights, companionship mattered. Two guards standing close together could share body warmth without even speaking. A guard might lean a shoulder against a wall heated by a nearby brazier while whispering a joke to his comrade. Moments like these, small and fleeting, were lifelines in a world where comfort was rare and survival was constant. Outside, the castle remained a frozen fortress. Snow drifted silently against battlements, frost crept along window slits, and the wind howled across the courtyard. Inside, the guards learned to harness every possible source of warmth: stone, fire, straw, and even each other. The castle's walls, which seemed cold and lifeless by day, became living structures at night, storing and giving back the heat they had absorbed, silently assisting those who braved the dark. By morning, when pale sunlight crept through narrow arrow slits and torch flames died down, the warmth lingered. Not enough to banish the cold entirely, but enough to make it survivable. Through clever design, layering, and careful use of every resource, The guards had turned the stone that breathed cold into stone that breathed warmth. And so the night passed, not in comfort, but in ingenuity, endurance, and the quiet triumph of human cleverness.
In the heart of a medieval castle, when the torches dimmed and the night stretched endlessly, fire was more than light. It was life and warmth. Guards on night duty depended on fire in ways far beyond cooking meals. A single brazier in a corner, a few glowing coals, or a stone heated near the hearth could determine whether a man survived the night or shivered until dawn. But fire alone was not enough. Endurance came through brotherhood, the quiet companionship shared between men who faced the same hardships. Two guards standing shoulder to shoulder could share warmth even without speaking. Sometimes, in the middle of a long, frozen watch, a whispered joke would escape. A fleeting laugh echoed through the stone corridors, small, but enough to remind them they were alive, human, and not alone. The guards developed routines, tiny rituals that became survival strategies. They walked circles on the battlements, stamping their boots and swinging their arms to keep blood flowing. They huddled together during breaks, sharing scarves or cloaks, using every layer of clothing to trap warmth. A heated stone tucked beneath a cloak, a small fire hidden behind a wall, or even the body heat of a loyal hound lying nearby, all became essential tools against the cold. The layout of the castle played a role too. Small chambers, called guard rooms, were often placed near fireplaces or kitchens, so that the warmth of the day's cooking would linger into the night. Thick stone walls absorbed heat during daylight and radiated it slowly, creating tiny pockets of survivable warmth for anyone who knew where to find them. Guards became intimately familiar with these pockets. Certain walls radiated heat better than others. Certain corners were shielded from drafts, and certain stones held warmth longer. They planned their resting positions around these secrets, quietly rotating their bodies to maximize comfort. Firelight also shaped their social life at night. While the castle slept, men whispered, shared stories, or hummed small tunes to ward off the creeping chill and loneliness. A low chuckle, a whispered word, or a subtle nod were markers of trust and camaraderie. Small gestures like sharing a piece of bread or a swig of hot ale strengthened bonds that could be life-saving during long, cold nights. The castle dogs were allies too. Big, shaggy hounds patrolled the corridors, lying close to guards during breaks. Their warm bodies pressed against cold stone created additional heat, a silent partnership between man and animal. Guards also became inventive. They stuffed straw into boots or cloaks, used layers of clothing creatively, and even constructed small partitions in their rooms to block drafts. Every strategy was a balance between protection and mobility. They needed to remain alert, ready for intruders or emergencies, even in the dead of night. As the night wore on, the combination of fire, warmth from stone, layers of clothing, and the quiet presence of comrades created a fragile ecosystem of survival. The cold outside might have been merciless, but inside the castle, cleverness, endurance, and human connection created warmth that was almost tangible. When dawn approached, pale light seeped through narrow windows. The guards, weary but alive, changed shifts or retreated to a corner where the remaining heat lingered. They carried the memory of the night's shared warmth with them, a combination of fire, stone, and brotherhood that made life in the freezing stone walls bearable. Even centuries later, the lessons remain clear. Survival in a medieval castle was not about a single hero or a single fire. It was a network of small strategies, clever architecture, and the simple human act of standing together against the cold. In every flicker of flame, in every heated stone, and in every quiet laugh between comrades, the warmth of the night endured.
The first light of dawn in a medieval castle was a quiet revelation. The long night had passed, and the frozen stone corridors, cold battlements, and frost-covered courtyards began to glow with pale sunlight filtering through narrow arrow slits. Guards who had endured hours of chilling duty could finally feel relief. Yet the morning brought its own routines and challenges. During the night, the castle had been alive with subtle movement. Torches flickered, small fires glowed in guard rooms, and heated stones radiated their stored warmth. Now, as the light spread across cold stone floors, the effectiveness of these nighttime strategies became clear. The walls that had seemed merciless during darkness now held traces of warmth, a reminder of the careful planning, the fires, and the human ingenuity that had kept men alive. Morning duties began slowly. Guards changed shifts, some moving toward kitchens to carry news, food, or firewood, while others stretched their stiff limbs near still warm walls. Small rituals persisted, huddling near each other for brief warmth, checking weapons, or removing wet cloaks that had absorbed the night's frost. Even the dogs, loyal companions throughout the dark hours, stretched and yawned beside their masters, sharing a final bit of heat before the day fully awakened. Breakfast preparations provided more than nourishment. Fires in kitchens and hearths began to blaze with purpose, and the warmth spread outward, seeping through thick stone walls into hallways and guard rooms. Guards quickly positioned themselves near these spots, gathering around stoves or ovens, the comforting heat reinforcing their endurance from the night before. Small conversations began to echo through corridors. Whispers, laughter, and gentle jokes marked the transition from the lonely vigilance of night to the social structure of day. Even in the early hours, camaraderie remained crucial. Sharing a simple laugh or a nod reminded men that they were part of a network, that endurance was not a solitary pursuit, but a shared human experience. The frozen courtyards, once desolate and threatening under the cover of night, now revealed their subtle beauty. Frost sparkled on stone walls, and the morning sun cast long shadows across battlements. Guards moving along the walls noticed the way sunlight touched their world, creating warm patches on stone that had absorbed the faint heat of previous days. Even a simple patch of sun became a strategic comfort, a place to pause and restore warmth before continuing patrols. Clothing remained vital. Layers were adjusted with precision, woolen cloaks draped just so, gambesons tightened for mobility, scarves rewrapped to block lingering drafts. Heated stones were stored for later use, ready for the next cold night. Every object, every habit, every placement of fire or stone had a purpose in this delicate balance between life and the relentless cold. By mid-morning, life returned to its fuller rhythm. Messengers carried news across the castle. Workers prepared meals, and the gates opened to welcome arrivals. But even amid these daytime routines, the lessons of the night lingered. Every heated wall, every shared smile, every clever placement of warmth had been a survival technique perfected over centuries. And so, when dawn finally broke over the frozen stone, it was not merely a transition from darkness to light. It was a testimony to human ingenuity, endurance, and connection. The men who had faced the cold together now stepped into the day with subtle warmth lingering in their bones, the memory of shared nights echoing quietly beneath the stone walls. Even centuries later, the story remains. Survival in a medieval castle was a careful orchestration of stone, fire, clothing, and companionship. Every dawn celebrated not only the rising sun, but the victory of preparation, knowledge, and quiet human resilience.
The morning sun stretched across the frozen castle walls, offering a brief reprieve from the long, harsh night. The frost began to melt in patches where sunlight touched the stone, and the first warmth of the day spread slowly into corridors and guard rooms. For the guards, this was the precious window, the day between two freezes, between the frozen night behind them and the cold that would inevitably return the following evening. They had hours to restore their strength, repair gear, and prepare for the next onslaught of chill. Breakfast was more than a meal, it was a strategy. Steaming bowls of porridge, hot bread, and warmed ale helped restore body heat and energy. Guards would gather in small groups, exchanging quiet jokes or observations about the night's watch. Laughter, these fleeting moments of humor were vital, a reminder that human warmth was just as important as fire or heated stones. Daily routines began carefully. Some guards took the time to clean and oil their armor, ensuring that it would not stiffen in the next night's cold. Others inspected their cloaks and scarves, layering them for maximum insulation. Even the placement of boots or gloves near a patch of sunlight or a warm hearth was deliberate. The castle itself was alive with activity. Servants carried fresh water from wells, cooks stoked fires in kitchens, and the smell of baked bread traveled through narrow corridors. Every source of warmth, no matter how small, became a tool in the ongoing battle against the cold. Guards also tended to small repairs. Straw mattresses were fluffed, heated stones were moved closer to frequently used rooms, and drafty shutters were adjusted to block the wind. Some men even created tiny partitions with cloth or wood to trap heat, clever little inventions born of necessity. During the day, sunlight became a silent ally. Walls and floors that had absorbed heat radiated slowly, offering pockets of comfort. Guards learned to move deliberately, seeking out these warm patches while performing their duties, quietly exploiting the architecture designed centuries before. Even mundane moments carried subtle strategies. A brief stretch in a sunlit corridor,
a whispered instruction to a fellow guard, where sharing a scarf or a cloak with a comrade became vital acts of survival. Laughter occasionally broke the quiet, as a guard fumbled with a stubborn piece of armor or misjudged a heated stone. These tiny human moments carried the weight of life itself. The dogs remained steadfast companions. Throughout the day they followed the men, resting near warm walls, sharing the heat of the sun, or curling close to sleeping guards. Their presence was comforting, silent, and reliable. By afternoon, the fleeting warmth began to wane. The cold of evening was already creeping across battlements and courtyards. Guards used the remaining light to prepare for the coming night, relocating heated stones, adjusting layers, and quietly reviewing the rotation of watches. And as the sun dipped low, shadows lengthened, and the castle prepared for another frozen night, the men understood the rhythm of survival. Each day was a balance between endurance and ingenuity, warmth and vigilance. The hours between two freezes were precious, a small victory carved out in a harsh, stone-bound world. Even centuries later, the lessons endure. Survival was not merely about heat, fire, or clothing. It was about clever use of resources, human companionship, and the quiet, deliberate observation of one's environment. The day between two freezes was a testament to foresight, patience, and the relentless pursuit of comfort in a world built of stone. The cold in a medieval castle was more than a simple discomfort. It was an enemy that crept through the smallest cracks, seeping into every stone wall, every narrow corridor, and every worn layer of clothing that a guard could muster. Nights were merciless. Frost settled in hidden corners, condensing into sharp, biting crystals that made even the bravest man shiver uncontrollably. Yet amid these harsh, stone-walled nights, something extraordinary thrived, the subtle, enduring warmth of human companionship. Guards quickly realized that the night could not be faced alone. Even the most seasoned soldiers found the hours interminable, the darkness oppressive, and the cold unforgiving. A shared cloak, a shoulder pressed briefly against a comrade, or a whispered word of reassurance became far more valuable than any fire burning in the hearth. And humor, even in the direst moments, was a lifeline. A softly muttered joke about a clumsy step or a falling torch could spark a quiet chuckle, melting some of the night's tension. The architecture of the castle, harsh and unyielding as it seemed, played a subtle role in survival. Narrow corridors, clustered guard rooms, and strategically placed hearths allowed men to remain close enough to share heat, advice, and support. Heated stones tucked near sleeping spots or along pathways radiated a faint but welcome warmth. Guards learned quickly which walls absorbed the most sunlight during the day and retained it into the night, which corners of the courtyard were sheltered from wind, and which sections of the battlements were the most exposed. Every step, every placement of body and stone was a carefully calculated part of a survival strategy. Inside the guard rooms, routines were woven with collaboration. Young recruits watched veterans adjust layers of gambesons and scarves, tuck straw into boots, and secure gloves against frost. These lessons were not just practical, they were an unspoken transfer of wisdom and survival instinct. No man could endure long without learning the subtle arts of insulation, layering, and movement within the castle. The night often felt endless. In those hours, conversation became a shield. A whisper here, a murmur there, subtle exchanges about the placement of heated stones or the timing of watch rotations were essential. Sometimes laughter broke through the monotony, a guard fumbling with his armor, tripping on frost, or nearly dropping a torch. Such moments, fleeting as they were, reinforced trust, reminding each man that he was not alone, that another human being shared his vigil. Dogs, ever faithful, contributed silently to this network of warmth. Large, shaggy hounds patrolled the corridors, wandered through the guard rooms, and lay beside men during rest. A dog's fur pressed against cold stone or the guard's own body, adding a layer of heat that was both practical and reassuring. Their presence was a subtle comfort, a living heat source that also reminded men of loyalty, companionship, and the rhythm of life beyond the night. Small gestures carried immense weight. Sharing a cloak, lending gloves, or repositioning heated stones for a fellow guard were acts of survival and of trust. Young guards learned the importance of teamwork, how one person's vigilance allowed another to rest, how shared warmth reduced the risk of frostbite, and how the smallest collaboration could mean the difference between endurance and collapse. Even the simplest interactions were rich with strategy and subtle human emotion. A guard might quietly guide a companion toward a slightly warmer patch of floor, or indicate that a torch needed adjusting. He might offer a few words of encouragement during patrols, a reminder that the night, while harsh, could be endured together. And when one guard stumbled, or when armor proved cumbersome in the frost, a small laugh often followed, easing tension, restoring morale, and strengthening bonds. Meals, though sparse, were part of the shared experience. When small fires were stoked and porridge or bread was served, guards often gathered close, huddled near the hearths, and shared quiet conversation. These moments were brief, practical, and profoundly human. They were not feasts, they were sustenance in every sense, physical, emotional, and social. The night guard's responsibilities extended beyond staying awake. Patrols were timed and coordinated, and the placement of heated stones or blankets could influence who survived the coldest hours most comfortably. Sharing knowledge about the best spots for warmth or the safest routes through shadowed courtyards became a subtle but vital teaching tool. Each rotation, each shift, was a demonstration of both endurance and cooperation. Time moved differently in the cold. The minutes and hours seemed longer, and the darkness magnified every sound. Footsteps echoing across stone floors, the faint clinking of armor, the distant howl of a hound. Within this environment, companionship provided not just warmth, but orientation, rhythm, and the emotional scaffolding needed to navigate the endless night. Even in moments of quiet, the shared vigilance was evident. One guard might notice another shivering and offer a slight adjustment of a cloak. Another might move a heated stone closer to a sleeping companion. These acts, small yet profoundly impactful, wove a network of survival that extended beyond strategy. They became the invisible threads of brotherhood. As night gradually surrendered to the faint light of dawn, the bonds formed in darkness persisted. Guards emerged from narrow corridors, stretching stiff limbs near the walls warmed by the first touch of sunlight. Heated stones still radiated residual warmth, and the dogs, ever present, stirred and rose beside their human companions. The shared effort of the night left its imprint on both body and spirit, a subtle, enduring warmth that carried men through the morning and into the next shift. The camaraderie did not diminish with daylight. Tasks remained collaborative, clearing frost from walkways, adjusting cloaks and scarves, tending fires, and preparing heated stones for the next night. Guards exchanged brief jokes, smiled at minor mishaps, and reinforced routines learned through years of repetition. Even in sunlight, the memory of shared struggle and shared warmth lingered, guiding movements and sustaining morale. Through centuries, the lesson remains clear. Survival in a medieval castle was never a solitary pursuit. It required strategy, preparation, and ingenuity, but most of all, it relied on the invisible heat of human connection. Brotherhood in the cold was both a practical necessity and a profound emotional force. Every shared cloak, whispered joke, guiding hand, or quiet reassurance created a tapestry of warmth that no stone wall, no hearth, and no heated stone alone could provide. In those long, frozen hours, guards discovered that the most vital heat was not merely physical. It was human, subtle, and enduring. The night, with all its frost and shadow, became bearable not because of fire or heated stones alone, but because of the silent, steady presence of companions. The laughter shared over a misstep, the gentle guidance of a more experienced guard, the quiet comfort of a loyal hound, these became the pillars of survival. Even as centuries passed, the lesson remains immutable. In a harsh, unyielding environment, in the face of relentless cold and isolation, the human spirit endures most effectively when shared. Brotherhood in the cold was a lifeline, an invisible but potent shield, a network of warmth that ensured men not only survived, but persisted, ready to face another night, another frost, and another challenge. Every moment, every interaction, every strategic placement of body, stone, or cloak reinforced the simple truth: survival was a shared effort, and human connection was the ultimate source of endurance. In the silent stone corridors of the past, the warmth of companionship outlasted the cold, outshone the darkness, and carried men through the harshest nights. And even today, when we read of these castles and their men, we can feel it, the invisible threads of trust, care, and shared struggle.
In the heart of a medieval castle, warmth was never a casual luxury. Stone walls, while formidable in battle, were merciless in winter. Every block absorbed the cold during the day and released it at night, turning even the grandest hall into a freezing chamber. Yet architects and masons of the time were far from careless. Hidden in plain sight were engineering secrets designed to protect inhabitants from frost and aid the weary guards who patrolled these ancient fortresses.
Castles were marvels of practical design. Thick stone walls provided insulation not only from invading armies, but also from the harsh winter winds. Builders layered stone, mortar, and in some cases, brick, to create walls that could hold residual warmth. Some castles incorporated narrow interior passages, known as warm corridors, winding, enclosed routes connecting guard rooms and barracks, designed to trap and circulate heat generated by fires and torches.
The placement of hearths and fireplaces was another carefully considered secret. Strategically located at the center of living quarters or guard rooms, these fires allowed heat to radiate outward. In larger chambers, masonry was constructed to act as a thermal battery.
Stone floors absorbed heat during the day, while walls slowly released it at night. Guards, aware of this, often positioned themselves near these walls or close to heated stones to maximize their survival chances. Even chimneys were engineered with precision. Narrow flues drew smoke efficiently while retaining warmth inside the room. Some castles used double flue systems, one to carry smoke out, another to redirect residual heat back into the hallways or guard rooms. Guards would often place their patrol routes near these warm zones, knowing that even a few feet closer to the flue could mean a reprieve from frostbite. Guards themselves became part of the engineering. Clothing was layered meticulously, not only for insulation, but to complement the castle.
Architects also considered airflow a critical factor in preventing frost accumulation. Narrow windows with shutters could be opened just enough to allow ventilation without losing excessive heat. Some corridors were intentionally built with zigzag designs to block drafts while still permitting patrols. This subtle manipulation of airflow allowed guards to move through cold areas without experiencing the full bite of winter winds.
Even staircases were designed with warmth in mind. Spiral staircases, common in towers, minimized exposed surfaces and reduced wind funneling. Guards ascending or descending could maintain heat by moving through these enclosed spaces rather than open stairwells, making night patrols slightly more bearable. The placement of torches and lamps was not random. Torchlight produced both illumination and minimal heat, but its strategic positioning could dramatically improve a guard's comfort. In long hallways, torches were spaced to provide alternating warm zones, allowing guards to rest momentarily in their glow. These small pockets of heat became micro-resting areas, subtly engineered to enhance endurance. Interestingly, many castles incorporated water as a natural regulator. Shallow basins or channels inside guard rooms, sometimes filled with water during the day, would slowly release heat at night. Guards learned to position their straw bedding near these thermal zones, benefiting from the residual energy. Beyond physical structures, human ingenuity amplified the castle's engineering. Guards discovered patterns, which walls held warmth longest, which corners were prone to frost, how to stagger patrols to share heated zones. They would even rearrange heated stones, shift furs, or exchange blankets quietly, creating a dynamic, human-enhanced system of survival. Humor, again, played an unexpected role. A guard slipping on icy stones, a heated rock rolling unexpectedly, or a clumsy attempt to adjust a cloak could provoke laughter. These small moments relieved tension, fostered bonds, and reinforced trust, essential psychological tools for enduring relentless cold. Even castle dogs were integrated into this engineered warmth. Placed near heated stones or sleeping guards, their body heat contributed to the overall thermal system. They were not just companions, but practical extensions of the castle's subtle heat network. Some castles experimented with more advanced methods. Stone alcoves were sometimes lined with reflective metal or polished surfaces to radiate heat further. Firewood storage was often located adjacent to walls that led to guard rooms, ensuring minimal heat loss when feeding hearths. Guards quickly adapted to these layouts, positioning themselves advantageously during the longest watches. Training of young guards also incorporated these engineering secrets. Veterans would teach recruits where to stand, how to layer clothing effectively,
how to use heated stones, and how to read the subtle signs of heat retention in stone walls. Over time, these lessons became instinctive, allowing guards to survive nights that might otherwise have been unbearable. Even outdoor spaces were subtly engineered for warmth. Courtyards often included sheltered alcoves, windbreaks, and walls that deflected cold air while allowing movement. Patrol routes were planned to minimize exposure, and guard rotations were carefully timed to prevent prolonged cold stress. Every architectural choice, every human adaptation reinforced the hidden engineering of warmth. The greatest secret, however, was subtlety itself. Most visitors would never notice the combination of design, placement, and human ingenuity that allowed guards to survive. The stones, the torches, the walls, the heated stones, the dogs, the patterns of patrols, all were part of a hidden system, a carefully orchestrated network of survival that only insiders fully understood. Even humor played a strategic role. A quiet laughter over minor mishaps relieved tension, fostered bonds, and reinforced trust, essential psychological tools for enduring relentless cold. By morning, the results of these hidden engineering marvels were evident. Guards emerged from their watches, stiff but alive, their bodies warmed both by fire and strategy, their spirits buoyed by shared endurance. Heated stones still radiated faint warmth, walls retained residual heat, and straw beds near inner walls offered moments of comfort. Every element, from construction to human adaptation, had worked in concert to preserve life. These secrets, often unrecorded in history books, reveal the deep understanding medieval builders and guards had of physics, human physiology, and practical survival. Every stone, hearth, and sleeping arrangement had a purpose. Every minor adjustment by guards was informed by experience, turning a harsh, frozen castle into a manageable, survivable environment. Even centuries later, the ingenuity is clear. Surviving a medieval winter demanded intelligence, cooperation, and subtle mastery of one's surroundings. The hidden engineering secrets of warmth, stone walls, heated stones, stair placement, airflow management, torchlight, dogs, and human ingenuity all intertwine to create a lifeline against the cold. The lesson is timeless. Warmth in a medieval castle was never accidental. It was deliberate, designed, and maintained through both architecture and human action. Every guard, every dog, every heated stone was part of a complex, interconnected system ensuring life continued through freezing nights. And in understanding these hidden secrets, we glimpse not only the brilliance of medieval engineering, but also the endurance, creativity, and resilience of the men who lived, patrolled, and survived within those stone walls.
Night in a medieval castle was not simply a pause between days. It was an intense, drawn-out canvas upon which the mind painted both vivid fears and fleeting dreams. The cold was a constant companion, gnawing at exposed skin, creeping into joints, and freezing breath into small clouds that vanished into shadowed corridors. Guards, tasked with enduring the long hours, were left not only to battle the frost, but also the endless loop of thoughts that the darkness invited. Every footstep echoed through stone halls, each faint clink of armor amplified by silence. In those hours, the mind wandered. Some guards found themselves thinking of home, a hearth, a family,
or a warm bed that felt impossibly distant. Others recalled past battles, moments of triumph, or mistakes that haunted them quietly. The cold heightened these reflections, sharpening their edges, turning minor regrets or memories into almost tangible specters. Dreams in such nights were fragmented. A guard might close his eyes for a few stolen moments of sleep, only to find himself wandering through familiar fields, chasing fleeting fires or reliving battles in miniature. These dreams were punctuated by the real sensation of cold, a draft slipping through stone cracks, a torch flickering, or armor pressing too heavily on his chest, and he would awaken with a shiver, only partially comforted by the human warmth of a comrade nearby. Fears, too, were a constant presence. Shadows stretched along corridors, contorting into shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. A distant howl of a dog or the scraping of stone could set hearts racing. Guards whispered prayers or muttered reassurances to themselves, small defenses against the anxiety that seeped in with every gust of wind. Yet in these moments of fear, humor often intervened. A guard slipping on frost-covered stones, almost dropping a torch or tripping over a stray cloak, could provoke quiet laughter, breaking tension and reminding everyone that they were human. These small eruptions of amusement were crucial, a psychological shield that made the night tolerable and reinforced camaraderie. Loneliness was mitigated by the subtle rhythms of life within the castle. The faint warmth of a heated stone, the shared breathing of companions, the soft shuffle of footsteps in rotation, all formed a tapestry of reassurance. Each guard knew, consciously or not, that he was not truly alone. The network of shared vigilance provided a mental anchor against despair. Thoughts often returned to danger. Patrols were not merely routine, they were survival exercises. One lapse in attention could mean injury or death, from frostbite, accidents, or enemy intrusion. The mind therefore remained alert, continuously evaluating routes, the stability of stairs, the placement of torches, and the behavior of fellow guards. Even as fatigue set in, the psychological need to remain vigilant reinforced a constant low-level tension that only brief moments of humor or shared warmth could relieve. Sleep, when it came, was often shallow and fragmented. Guards would lie on straw beds or benches, sometimes partially armored, boots on, hands near weapons. The cold prevented deep rest, and dreams were often interrupted by sudden awareness of frost creeping into extremities or the shifting of a sleeping companion. In those brief moments between wakefulness and dreams, the mind wandered, creating elaborate scenarios, battles, homecomings, past mistakes, and imagined threats, blending fear and longing into a surreal mental landscape. Some guards found solace in small rituals, a whispered chant, a soft hum, or a gentle adjustment of clothing could provide temporary comfort. The human body, shivering under layers of wool and linen, relied on these rituals as much on fire or heated stones. Even a shared joke over a minor mishap became a ritual, a bridge between cold isolation and human connection. The psychology of enduring such nights was complex. Guards learned to compartmentalize fear, humor, vigilance, and fatigue. Each element had its place. Fear heightened attention. Humor preserved morale. Vigilance ensured survival. And fatigue demanded brief but calculated moments of rest. The balance between these elements was delicate, and the most experienced guards moved through the night with a fluid awareness of their own mental state. Interactions between guards were subtle but meaningful. A glance across a corridor, a brief whisper, or the careful passing of a heated stone could communicate reassurance or instruction without breaking the rhythm of the night. Such small acts reinforced bonds and provided mental support even in the absence of speech or physical touch. Animals,
particularly castle dogs, played an understated but critical role. Their breathing, warmth, and presence offered both comfort and companionship. A guard might drift into semi-sleep with a dog curled beside him, drawing subtle heat and a sense of continuity from its steady, rhythmic breathing. The simple existence of life, shared in these frozen spaces, became a psychological anchor against despair. As the night deepened, imagination sometimes took hold. Guards envisioned past lives, imagined possible futures, or contemplated the unseen corners of the castle. These mental journeys were often tinged with fear, a shadow that could become an enemy, a sound that might signal danger, but also with curiosity and wonder. The interplay of mental activity, environmental challenge, and subtle companionship created a unique, intense psychological environment. The cold itself influenced thought. Numb fingers, frozen toes, and stiffened joints reminded guards of their vulnerability. These sensations amplified the intensity of dreams and fears. Even minor discomfort became a signal to shift, adjust, or move, blending physical survival with mental alertness. Every breath, every small movement, and every quiet observation became part of a continuous negotiation with both body and mind. Humor continued to emerge as a vital tool. A guard might whisper a sarcastic comment about the cold, tease a companion over a misstep, or laugh quietly at the absurdity of trying to sleep fully armored. These moments, though brief, provided psychological release and reinforced the shared human experience that made survival possible. The eventual approach of dawn did not erase these experiences. Guards emerged from night patrols stiff, eyes heavy, and minds racing with fragmented dreams and lingering fears. Yet there was relief. The faint light of morning promised warmth, both from sunlight and from human rituals. Breakfast near the hearth, shared conversation, and the slow restoration of body heat. Even after centuries, the human dimension of these frozen nights remains apparent. Endurance was as much about the mind as the body. Guards relied on rituals, humor, vigilance, and companionship to navigate a harsh and unyielding environment. Their thoughts, dreams, and fears were interwoven with physical survival strategies, creating a holistic system that allowed men to endure nights that would have otherwise broken lesser spirits. Ultimately, the night guard's psychological landscape was shaped by the delicate balance of cold, companionship, vigilance, and human ingenuity. Dreams offered temporary escape, fears demanded alertness, and subtle humor preserved morale. Together, these mental and emotional strategies allowed the guards to navigate the endless cold and emerge alive, ready to face another day within the stone walls of the castle. The frozen nights of medieval castles were not merely physical challenges. They were exercises in resilience, mental discipline, and the subtle art of human connection. Through humor, companionship, vigilance, and strategic thinking, guards transformed fear and discomfort into endurance. In their minds, warmth was more than fire. It was the presence of another human, a shared laugh, and the confidence that even in the coldest, darkest hours, they were not alone.
The frozen guards, standing silently through the endless nights, were not merely statues of flesh and bone caught in the cruel hands of winter. They were witnesses. Witnesses to the fragility of human life, to the fleeting nature of warmth, and to the quiet resilience of hope. Even as the frost claimed their bodies, their legacy quietly etched itself into the chronicles of time,
whispering lessons to those who would listen.
Across centuries, the frozen guards became more than a story of death in isolation. They transformed into symbols, symbols of endurance, of patience, and of the subtle strength that lies hidden in silence. Scholars, historians, and dreamers alike began to ponder the invisible lessons left behind. The guards' lives, though cut short, spoke volumes about the human spirit, about the courage to stand in the face of overwhelming odds, and about the simple yet profound need to preserve humanity even in the harshest conditions. These lessons were not written in grand letters or spoken loudly in grand halls. They were found in the soft footprints left in snow, in the delicate carvings of ice on their armor, and in the stories passed down by those who dared to explore the frozen wastelands long after the guards had succumbed. Each step into the icy plains revealed the echoes of their existence, echoes that carried warmth despite the chill. The world learned that endurance is not always visible in action. Sometimes it resides quietly within, unseen, yet ever present. The frozen guards, in their silence, taught that courage is not measured by the noise we make, but by the steadfastness we show when no one is watching. They reminded the world that even in isolation, even in apparent despair, there can be dignity, there can be purpose, and there can be a warmth that defies the coldest winters. Scientists studying the frozen remains of these guardians found traces of minerals, preserved foods, and rudimentary tools, all pointing to careful planning, attention, and discipline. Even in death, the guards had provided a map for survival, a template that could be learned from, adapted, and shared. It was a subtle reminder that every action, no matter how small, contributes to the legacy we leave behind. Every careful step, every thoughtful gesture, every silent vigil adds up to a story that can inspire generations long after our voices have faded. The local villagers, who lived on the fringes of the frozen territories, told stories of the guards not with fear, but with reverence. Mothers would recount tales of the silent sentinels to children before sleep, not to frighten, but to instill a sense of resilience. Travelers who ventured through the icy expanse would leave tokens, carved symbols, candles, or letters, paying homage to these brave souls. Each tribute was a recognition that life, even when fleeting and fragile, could teach the world profound truths. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Guard's story is the idea of warmth as a legacy. They could not escape the frost, yet their presence radiated a form of warmth, a metaphorical warmth born of commitment, of unwavering purpose, and of silent heroism. This warmth did not melt the ice around them, nor did it thaw the harshness of their environment, yet it penetrated human hearts far beyond the frozen plains. Writers, philosophers, and artists drew inspiration from this paradox, that the coldest circumstances could yield the most enduring lessons about empathy, courage, and resilience. Even modern explorers, equipped with the most advanced technology and protective gear, often speak of a strange, almost spiritual presence in the regions where the frozen guards once stood. Cameras capture peculiar auroras and fleeting shadows, but more importantly, the explorers speak of an inner calm, a quiet clarity that seems to descend upon those who venture into these lands. Some describe it as a whisper of encouragement, a soft reminder that endurance, dignity, and courage are timeless qualities. Historians began to compare these frozen sentinels with other unsung guardians across the world, soldiers, workers, and ordinary people who silently bear hardships without seeking recognition. They saw a pattern that the greatest lessons are often embedded in ordinary acts of perseverance, in the quiet moments where no eyes are watching. The frozen guards became a universal metaphor, a mirror reflecting the resilience inherent in every human being. The children of distant lands, hearing about the frozen guards in bedtime stories or documentaries, learned empathy and patience without even realizing it. They imagined standing tall in impossible conditions, holding on when everything seemed lost, and finding strength within themselves to endure. These subtle lessons seeped into culture, inspiring songs, poems, and even scientific endeavors aimed at preserving life in extreme environments. In a way, the frozen guards transcended their own time. They became teachers of a silent philosophy, that the warmth of one's spirit cannot be measured by the absence of cold, but by the ability to maintain integrity, courage, and humanity when surrounded by adversity. Their story is a reminder that every life, no matter how brief or seemingly inconsequential, holds the potential to teach the world something invaluable. As centuries passed, monuments were erected, books were written, and research continued. Yet the essence of the guards' legacy remained in something far more subtle than monuments or texts. It resided in the quiet moments, in the reflective gaze of a historian, in the thoughtful pause of an explorer, in the whispered stories told to children at night. It resided in every act of courage, patience, and resilience performed in the silent battles of daily life. And as the night falls across the modern world, as winds howl through cities and snow drifts across distant mountains, the spirit of the frozen guards lingers. It whispers not of fear or sorrow, but of the profound truth that even in the harshest conditions, warmth can exist. Warmth of purpose, warmth of dedication, and warmth of a legacy that outlives the fragility of the flesh. The world, forever indebted to these silent sentinels, carries forward the lessons they imparted without words. It learns that endurance is noble, that patience is powerful, and that even the smallest acts of courage can resonate across time. Every frozen landscape tells their story. Every whispering wind echoes their commitment. And every human heart touched by their legend carries forward the warmth they left behind. The frozen guards, standing eternal in the pages of history, remind us gently, almost imperceptibly, that legacy is not in fame or fortune, but in the quiet strength we leave behind, a warmth that can thaw the coldest corners of the human experience. And now, as you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind wander to the icy plains, to the silent sentinels,
and to the warmth that transcends frost, fear, and time itself. Let your dreams carry you across snow-covered landscapes, where every step echoes courage, every breath whispers resilience, and every heartbeat carries the warmth of the frozen guard's enduring legacy. As our journey comes to a close tonight, take a moment to feel the quiet strength of those who came before us. The frozen guards remind us that even in the coldest moments there is warmth, a warmth born of courage, patience, and purpose. Let this thought settle in your mind as you drift further into rest.
Now, slowly, let go of all the thoughts, worries, and tensions from your day. Take a deep breath and feel the calmness surround you. Just like the gentle night embraces everything around it, your mind is slowly unwinding, releasing every little stress, every tiny worry. Every muscle, every nerve is relaxing, letting go. You are safe. You are comfortable. You deserve this peaceful, deep sleep. Tomorrow awaits with a fresh new morning, a new